From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. James, how are you today? It's good to be back, and I'm excited for today's episode.
Always great to be back, Steve. How are you doing?
Doing very well. It's good that we're getting a chance to talk with a friend of the show and a personal friend, and somebody, if you tuned into our last episode, is able to bring some fresh new questions to us. So with that, I'd like to welcome back Dan Ferrisi. He's the group editor, commercial and security with Emerald, and you know him probably the most from Commercial Integrator. Welcome back, Dan.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much, James. Really appreciate the return invitation. I'm going to keep on coming back till you kick me out. So thank you very much for having me.
But I don't think that's going to happen. So we look forward to seeing you more and more. If you didn't catch the last episode, please do. It was a great conversation. Dan led us with one of the questions that he was able to cultivate from the AV integrator space. He's very much in touch with AV integrators across the country and probably the world, but what he does very well is he's really involved in the community and is able to gather the burning topics that people want to hear more about, and he's bringing to you and to us some of those questions about programming and control. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan, and let's hear what we have for today.
Yeah, I'll just repeat something I said last time, which is I really think Control Concepts, the Ask the Programmer podcast, you've done collectively a really good job of raising the profile of programmers, the indispensable work that you do, how it contributes to the outstanding outcomes that all of us are looking for in integrated systems. So I think that's really been a service. And because of that, we have a lot of people who are asking me, as just kind of a conduit for the industry, questions about programming. They want to know what's going on, what the permutations are, different trends. So I've been very fortunate to have people come to me with some questions, and I'm going to now pass along the next question to you. That is this. It seems like deadlines are always tight these days and budgets are always limited. That can make AV programmers work pretty tough. So what strategies can and do programmers utilize to reduce the burden and deliver great outcomes, even in spite of, again, limited budgets, tight deadlines, that it can't make things easy, but you overcome anyway?
Okay, Steve, you can jump in. I jumped in first on the last one.
I'm glad to start the conversation, but I think we'll go back and forth. You know, I can provide a perspective from the independent programmer side, which is always a little bit different than an in-house programmer. So I want to just give that caveat, and also probably different from an in-house integrator programmer. So independent programmers, they are very much building relationships with integrators and end users and trying to make sure that they can be a valued resource and a partner and somebody who can be counted on. So it is often that what we would do is reach out to try to stay ahead of needs and try to understand what's coming down the pipeline, be able to prep and share our availability, our lead times, what we needed in order to be able to be successful, so that we didn't find ourselves in situations where somebody was counting on us and we weren't able to come through. There is always going to be those crunch time projects. There's always going to be those times that we have to expedite something. And is always going to be those situations where we have to make good on something because we're a partner. With that said, we're very strict about trying to be realistic. And we have found that compressing projects too much, we just couldn't be successful because we would be compromising our process. And process was critical to us. That's really why people liked working with us, because we had a system of how we would go about making sure we had a successful outcome that involved having collaboration in the beginning, making sure that we defined a scope and agreed to a scope, and making sure that we had a proper time for development and testing. And we didn't find ourselves as a lot of people tend to talk about, sitting on a bucket at a job site writing code. So
Yeah.
it really, we knew that that isn't successful. Did that happen every so often? Of course, but we really tried to make sure that we avoided crunch time as much as possible. And it's just critical to be able to both be upfront and realistic. Mark Levecchia, a good friend of mine, he always says that, I only have one chance to win your business, and if I agree to something and I don't come through, I'm, even though I say no this time, you're not going to be happy if I mess up your project. So that's really my overarching theme, but of course there's more to tell. And James, I'll let you jump in.
So, thank you, Steve. And I think you bring up a lot of great points. I will preference this also with my experience where I'm coming with this from is I am in higher ed. The very key thing in higher ed, and all us higher ed tech managers will tell you this: classes start when classes start. So we know deadlines. We know deadlines very well. With that said, we understand things are going to hit the fan and you're going to be put in a stress position. Like Mike Tyson always said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's especially in higher ed, you have to really plan the whole project out, knowing that classes start when classes start. And you can't change that. That is ingrained in higher ed. You can't go like, oh, this equipment didn't come in, so that pushed our programming back. We need to push the start of the class back a week. Nope. Classes start when classes start. There is no pushing. So with that said, the way we can combat that is we talked about a little bit the last episode too of pre-staging. Do a lot of your pre-staging because that's not impacting the current rooms. Now, if it's a brand new build, that's a little different. You got something, but your pre-staging, if you can throw that equipment and do all your programming, pre-staging, all that stuff, you have less time in the room and there's less time the room is down. Goes back to building a sandbox. I know I've mentioned that numerous times. Build your sandbox. That is where you should be spending your time for development, not when you're trying to get a classroom up and running. That is not the time to play with untested code or untested procedures. Use your standards. Again, we don't really have standards in AV, but let's make our standards. Build your standard code, you build your standard template for rooms. Okay, this is what a classroom does. This is what a conference room does. This is what a boardroom does. Like build those standards, and then when you roll them out, you can actually put them in place and less time actually in the field because you did all your pre-planning ahead of time. And then this is where the post-planning comes in. Document what doesn't work. Document what does work. Revamp your standard. If you find like, hey, I have this cool way now, a new function or a new process of handling this, go back and do that in your pre-staging. Your post-development, develop that in your sandbox, make sure it's clean and reliable, and then get it ready for deployment.
The words I keep hearing, and whether it's standards, policies, procedures, process, the one that you mentioned, Steve, what it really seems to be is that a program or a programming company, independent program, whoever it is, needs to have enough time, enough wiggle room not to have to compromise on their core foundational approach. Because the reason they're going to you or your company is because they believe in your approach. They're sold on your approach. Maybe they've gotten good word of mouth about the work you've done for others. But if either a budgetary constraint or a timeline constraint causes you to compromise on your own process, your own policy, your own way of doing things, then you're really going to shoot yourself in the foot. I mean, to the point that you said earlier, it's better to turn the job down if you can't do it to the level you expect of yourself than to say, oh, I'll try, but I don't know if I can do it to my level. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot that way.
And I think if you're an internal programmer, sometimes you can't say no. So I feel for those folks, and I would like, from their perspective, some of the things that they might be able to do is at least educate their team as to why compression of a schedule causes them to not perform well. And when those types of situations come up, either present to them the trade-offs that might have to happen. Perhaps we can deliver this in phases. Maybe there's some way that we can make this project be more realistic, set expectations properly with the client. I've heard a lot of stories about, and this is why there's conflict between the sales and technical people, is that salespeople will like to promise things that the technical people have to deliver. And I've worn both hats because I have to. So I understand where that comes from, but there's certainly friction there, and there needs to be some balance, because we do have to take care of the client, and sometimes these things happen, but we have to do it responsibly.
Yeah. I guess the follow-up question I would have, the original question I conveyed on behalf of the audience not only talked about compressed time schedules, but also budget limitations. So I'm curious how that factors in. I mean, I know for integrators, for example, it's probably the bane of their existence when someone comes to them and says, oh, I want 0.7 millimeter direct view LED here, and my budget for that is $50,000 or something like that. I mean, like, are there realistic and unrealistic programming expectations relative to budget, and how much do you butt into that as opposed to timeline constriction?
I'll jump in on this one, and I think this is a general term, not just for programming, for AV, is people are sticker shock when it comes to AV. They don't like. I just had one the other day where I had a request. They're like, "Oh, I move offices in the conference room, so I want the conference room stuff moved over to my old office, and my old office stuff moved into the conference room. Oh, you're just moving displays." And it's like, I looked, I'm like, no, you're not just moving displays. It's, you got amplifiers, you got speakers, you got microphones, you got all this other stuff that they take for granted. They don't understand it, they don't see it. And that's the number one thing with programming. Nobody sees the programming, the code. They see it as a line item on the bill, and they're like, why am I paying so much money for the code? And I don't understand, because it's not something they physically can touch. We look at displays, like Dan, you brought up the direct LED. That's somebody can see. We can put two screens next to each other and go, here's your $10,000 display, here's your $100,000 display. And they can go, okay, I see the difference. But if I sit here and go, here's your $10,000 programming and here's your $100,000 programming, the user is like, well, what's the difference if they're both
Right.
functioning the same? There could be a whole bunch of legwork done behind the work that they don't understand. So it goes to that, you're not paying for the work, you're paying for the knowledge and experience of the person to provide you a service and a product that you're looking for. So yes, we have to educate our users. So to educate our users, we need to be educated of what it takes, so we can clearly and concisely explain to that user, yes, I understand the coding is going to cost this much. Does sound like a lot, but here, why it costs so much. That's probably the hardest thing, is to explain to them in a clear, concise way of why it's going to cost so much.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You can concretize something that's visual in front of your eyes. You can actually look, do I see the pixelation? Do I not? It's harder to do that with something that's more nebulous like programming.
I totally agree with everything that James said, and it's great examples too. The thing that I want to add to that is that there are ways of making choices, though, to make your life a little easier. So, and perhaps you work with products that that you've worked with in the past, perhaps, and I'll put it. We just spoke with Craig Underwood a couple of episodes ago, episodes 169 and 170, and Craig talked about the fact that he chooses products based on the fact that they already have plugins, modules, drivers prepared, so he doesn't have to do that work. It's saving him time. It's giving him a known solution. Of course, I will concur on that, because that's the business that my company is in. But there's a true benefit to it, to pick products that are going to be easily integrated. And why make life harder for you? Because as James said, in the end, they're not going to know the difference between you really worked hard to make this work and you didn't have to do a whole lot to make this system work. Do they work or do they not work? And if there's not anything that's really noticeably whiz bang difference, that underlying programming effort isn't going to be valued because nobody really understands it. So make good choices and try to standardize it, as James said, and also try to um, pick product, make decisions that are going to be in your best interest. There's a time and a place to use the latest and greatest, and there's a time in the place to use the old reliable. So when budgets come into play, you have to make choices that are going to be suitable for your constraints.
Well said.
And also save you time. So
When you save time, you save money.
Mhm.
So that's a good way for us to wrap this one. Dan, we really truly appreciate this great conversation, and we really truly appreciate the fact that your audience has taken the time to uh, arm you with some of these topics, and we've been able to hopefully educate some people on programming. Because as you said, one of the reasons that we exist, and one of the missions of Ask the Programmer is really to provide clarity and to answer questions and to help both programmers understand that there are others like them out there, but also people who want to understand programming better have a resource to go to. So thanks for helping us pursue that mission.
It's a treat for me to be a conduit for our audience, a conduit for members of our industry to learn more about programming. I think James and you really do the entire industry a service with shows like Ask the Programmer, and I'm honored to be asked to be on again in that conduit role on behalf of our audience.
And if you haven't gotten a chance to see the article that Dan so gracefully gave us the opportunity to publish, there's a little bit of a piece on commercialintegrator.com that talks about Ask the Programmer, why it exists, and was one of the stepping stones for this episode and will be for future episodes. But Dan, how can people get in touch with you? Keep giving you some information, give you some feedback, how it can continue the conversation, and also meet up with you.
Yeah, I certainly encourage people to email me at dan.ferrisi@emeraldx.com if you have questions that you'd like me to pass on to Steve and James. Perhaps I'll be invited on again, and I'd love to pass them on behalf of you. Or find me on commercialintegrator.com, securitysales.com, which is our physical and electronic security brand. You'll see me at CIX, Commercial Integrator Expo, and CD Expo coming up in September. Looking forward to seeing you there, Steve, as well as at Total Tech Summit in November. You can find me at Dan Ferrisi Edit on X. You can find me on LinkedIn. As I said last time, I'm going to kind of resolve mid-year to get more active on socials again. I'm so busy right now, but I really value the AV Tweeps community. I'm going to try to find some more time to be more active than I have been.
And I tell you, connect with Dan. Not only will you be impressed, but you'll learn some new vocabulary words, and you'll also he really is as genuine, as warm online as he is in person. So thank you so much, Dan.
Very kind of you.
James, how could people get in touch with you, continue the conversation, keep up with your work, and keep going, keep this community going?
The best way to get a hold of me is either on X at AV_James King or LinkedIn in our community group, Ask the Programmer. I'm in there as well. Anything with HEPMA, I'm involved with HEPMA, again, writer for the Higher Ed Digital Magazine, the IT and AV Com. Again, Google me, you'll find me.
And I'm going to put out a little challenge to the HEPMA community. I'd like to see some more HEPMA programmers out there join in this conversation, because I know you're out there. I got to meet several of you at Infocom. Please reach out. Please let us know you're out there, because we want you to be part of this. And for me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. My company, Control Concepts, is a supporter of the show, and you could find us at controlconcepts.net. We develop the API integrations that connect manufacturers' products with control platforms, and we also do some utility modules that can be found on our store at controlconcepts.net/utility modules. And those are low cost and no cost building blocks that help programmers get their jobs done easier and also add more features and functionality to your programs. And you can continue to follow our show on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast player. We welcome a rating review. Let us know what you think. Please reach out and provide some topics and questions. And we want to continue these conversations. These last 2 episodes were really very fun and very informational. And I hope you'll find that as well. And until next time, this has been Ask the Programmer.